They moved in for peace, a quiet life, a fresh start. But in a luxury-gated community where everything looked perfect on the outside, they were never truly welcome. At first it was subtle, inspections, letters, the kind of silence that says everything. Then came the threats, the fake complaints, the tampered evidence. A campaign to make them leave without ever saying why. They stayed calm, they documented, they fought back, and when they uncovered the truth, it wasn't just about them anymore. It was a pattern, a system, and a man who thought no one would ever challenge him, but he was wrong. This is a story about dignity, resistance, and what it takes to stand your ground when the world politely tells you to disappear. Do you think they made the right choice by staying? Let us know in the comments. Your voice matters here too. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Andre's hands rested on the steering wheel as they turned past the ornate security gate of Azure Palms Villas. The guard had barely looked up after confirming their names, waving them through like it was any other day. To Andre and Malik, though, it wasn't just any other day. It was the first day of their new chapter. Malik leaned back in the passenger seat, sunglasses pushing back his curls, gazing out the window. "I still can't believe we're doing this," he said, his voice half a laugh, half a sigh. "It feels fake." "It's not fake. It's earned," Andre replied, guiding the car past manicured lawns and identical white stucco homes with terracotta roofs. "You worked nights for 3 years. I taught those endless 8 a.m. classes. We deserve this." Their new home sat near the edge of the cul-de-sac, a two-bedroom villa with high ceilings, clean lines, and a backyard that backed onto a palm-lined trail. It wasn't flashy, just quiet and beautiful, peaceful. That's all they wanted. The owner had insisted on meeting them in person, which Andre had thought was a little odd but understandable. People were particular about who they rented to in places like this. Still, the initial tour had gone smoothly. Mr. Havorson, the owner, was polite if a little stiff. He wore a linen shirt tucked into iron slacks and kept glancing at his phone during their conversation. He had looked Malik up and down a few times, which Andre noticed but tried not to overthink. They had the income, excellent references, and a clean record. There shouldn't be a problem. That first afternoon, they pulled into the driveway, Malik hopping out to unlock the door while Andre unloaded boxes. The house smelled like citrus cleaner and new paint. The furniture they'd had in storage for months was scheduled to arrive the next day, but neither of them minded sleeping on the floor for a night. They spent the evening eating pizza on the back patio, barefoot, toasting with sparkling water under the dim porch light. Malik glanced around. "Do you hear that?" Andre paused, holding his glass in the air. "What?" "Exactly nothing." They both laughed. The next few days were a blur of unpacking and runs to the home goods store. Malik set up the kitchen, organizing everything like a surgical suite. Andre arranged his home office, lining the shelves with books and academic journals. They were both meticulous in their own ways. That's what made it work. They had weathered harder times, long-distance stints, Malik's mother's illness, years of saving and saying no to things they couldn't afford. This wasn't luxury. This was stability. One morning, Andre was returning from a jog when he spotted Mr. Havorson standing in their front yard. He wore the same pressed clothes and had his arms crossed. Andre slowed to a walk, sweat dampening the collar of his t-shirt. "Morning," he called out. Havorson turned with a start, then nodded slowly. "You weren't in when I came by, just doing a spot check, new renters and all." "Did we miss something?" "No, just checking that everything's in order. Had a few issues with past tenants. The last guy had 6 dogs and a motorcycle he kept revving at night." Andre chuckled politely. "We're pretty quiet. Malik's a nurse and I teach. Not much revving going on over here." Havorson didn't laugh. He squinted at the garden bed. "Looks like someone moved the sprinkler head. That wasn't like that before." Andre followed his gaze. It was barely noticeable. "We haven't touched the landscaping." Havorson gave a thin smile, just making a note. "Don't worry about it." He left soon after, muttering something about needing to check on another property. Andre watched him go, then glanced back at the sprinkler. He shrugged it off. People like that, landlords with too much time, always found something to nitpick. The next week, Malik invited 2 of his coworkers over for dinner. They stayed on the back patio, music low, laughter drifting out into the warm evening air. Around 9:30, a flashlight beam swept across the hedge. Andre stood up, squinting. "Excuse me," a voice barked. It was Havorson again, this time holding a clipboard. "I've had 2 noise complaints from your neighbors," he said, stepping forward without being invited. "This isn't a party zone, I made that very clear." Malik's face fell. "It's just us and 2 friends, we're not even playing loud music." Sound carries, and one of them said there was some kind of shouting. Andre stepped in, calm and clear. "We've been sitting here the whole time. No shouting, no loud music. If you'd like, we can invite you to sit and listen yourself." Havorson didn't answer. He scribbled something on his clipboard and turned without another word. Their guests left shortly after, exchanging awkward glances. Malik didn't say much while cleaning up, just kept his head down, scrubbing a plate harder than necessary. Andre laid a hand on his shoulder. "Let it go, we're not doing anything wrong." "I know," Malik muttered, "but it doesn't feel like he sees it that way." The following morning, a notice appeared taped to their front door, a formal warning from the HOA citing excessive noise after hours and guest disturbances. It was phrased in legalese, but the message was clear: they were being watched. Andre scanned the document twice, then opened his laptop. "We're going to start keeping records," he said. "Dates, times, visitors, anything that seems off." "You think it's gonna get worse?" Andre didn't answer right away. He looked toward the street where Havorsson's car was parked again, engine idling, watching, waiting. "I think it already has," he finally said. "But we're not going anywhere." Malik nodded and poured himself a coffee, eyes tired. The quiet they had longed for was beginning to fracture, piece by piece. But neither of them had any intention of running. They had fought too hard to get here. They were going to fight again, but this time it wouldn't just be for themselves. Malik first noticed it in the way people started pausing when they saw him walking to the mailbox. A neighbor watering his lawn would glance over, eyes narrowing slightly, before turning back to his roses. A couple walking their dog would suddenly lower their voices as they passed. He told himself it was in his head that maybe people were just private in these communities, but Andre felt it too. They'd been living in the villa for barely 2 weeks when Havorsson showed up again. It was a Wednesday afternoon. Andre had just wrapped up a virtual lecture when the doorbell rang. He opened the door to find the landlord standing there with a folder in hand and a flat, unreadable expression. "Just stopping by to check on a few things," Havorsson said. "Routine stuff." Andre stepped aside without saying much. Malik, who had been vacuuming the hallway, turned the machine off and gave Havorsson a brief nod. Havorsson walked through the house with deliberate slowness, his eyes scanning every room like he was inspecting a crime scene. He paused in the kitchen, opened the pantry door without asking, and stared at the spice rack for a full second before closing it again. "Still settling in?" he asked. "We're good," Malik said. "I noticed your car was parked on the street last night." "That's against HOA rules, driveway or garage only." Andre frowned. "We had deliveries coming and the driveway was blocked. It won't be a regular thing." "Even once can attract attention," Havorsson replied. "This is a very image-conscious community." Andre caught the subtle jab, the unsaid part. It wasn't about the car. It was about them. Havorsson lingered in the living room a moment longer before closing his folder with a snap. "You're both professional people. I expect you understand how important it is to maintain harmony in neighborhoods like this." Andre didn't answer. Malik stayed still, hands folded in front of him. Havorsson gave a half-smile. "You're not what I expected, that's all." Then he left. Later that evening, Malik repeated the words to himself while he was brushing his teeth. "You're not what I expected." He said it slowly, tasting the weight of it like he could wring more meaning out if he let it sit on his tongue longer. "I hate when people say that," he said finally. "It never means anything good." Andre sat on the edge of the bed, scrolling through something on his laptop. "It means he made assumptions, and we didn't fit them." "You think it's just that?" Andre closed the laptop softly. "No, I think he's trying to scare us out, one step at a time." By the following week, it had escalated again. An envelope arrived in the mail with another notice. This one listed concerns raised by multiple neighbors, a vague assortment of complaints that seemed pulled out of thin air: excessive foot traffic, strange smells, a dog barking late at night. They didn't own a dog. Malik stormed into the living room, letter in hand, and dropped it on the table. "This is harassment." Andre picked it up, reading it calmly. "We'll log it." "I don't want to just log it, I want to do something." "We will, but the right way. If we react emotionally, we lose the ground we're standing on." Malik took a breath and sat beside him. "I just never thought it'd be like this. I thought we'd made it past this kind of thing." "You'd think," Andre said. "But sometimes the neighborhood is quiet for a reason, not because it's peaceful, because people like him keep it that way." That weekend, they decided to host a small brunch, just two friends from Malik's hospital and an old colleague of Andre. They made pancakes, fruit salad, and coffee. They kept the music off, the windows open, and the front door unlocked for ease of entry. Everything was low-key. Still, the doorbell rang before noon. Andre opened it, and there was Havorsson again, arms folded, eyes scanning the hallway behind Andre as if looking for trouble. "Getting complaints again," he said. "Something about traffic in and out, people concerned about airbomb operations." Andre raised an eyebrow. "We live here, we're not renting it out, these are just our friends." Havorsson shrugged. "Just telling you what I've heard." Like I said, community standards. Malik appeared in the hallway behind Andre, a dish towel slung over his shoulder. We're not violating anything, he said plainly. Let's keep it that way, Havorson said, and left without another word. Their guests noticed the tension the moment they walked in. One of Malik's coworkers, a soft-spoken Filipina woman named Althea, asked, "Was that your landlord?" He didn't even say hi. Just doing his usual walk-bys, Malik muttered. Andre tried to change the subject, but the mood had shifted. Even laughter at the table felt like it echoed too loud. That night Malik couldn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling. "What if he's setting us up?" he asked. Andre turned toward him. "Like how?" "False complaints, fabricating violations, trying to make a case to evict us. We've done nothing wrong. That doesn't mean anything to people like him." Andre was silent. Then he said, "We'll put up cameras, get a doorbell cam, start documenting every visit, every letter, every conversation. If he wants to escalate, we'll be 2 steps ahead." The next morning, they ordered the equipment. Malik began photographing the front of the house, the driveway, the mailbox, the garden beds, anything that could be used against them. Andre started writing everything down in a shared Google Doc. They weren't paranoid, they were prepared. It wasn't long before they found their next entry for the logbook. Malik returned from work late one evening and noticed that one of their patio chairs was out of place. It had been moved slightly off the deck and into the gravel, tilted at an odd angle. He called Andre over. "I didn't leave it like that," Malik said. "You think someone came into the backyard." Andre checked the gate. It wasn't locked, but it had been closed when he last looked. Now it sat slightly ajar. They checked the new camera footage. There was a gap. The footage from 1:13 a.m. to 1:29 a.m. had gone black. Andre stared at the screen. "You've got to be kidding me." They replaced the SD card, set up backups to the cloud, and sent a copy of the missing segment to a friend in cybersecurity to verify. It was all too deliberate to be random. Havorson didn't show up for a few days after that, but they saw his car cruising by slowly more than once. He never stopped, just watched. When the next letter came, it was left under their doormat rather than mailed. This one accused them of modifying property without approval, citing unauthorized security devices visible from the street. Malik laughed bitterly. "So he doesn't want us to have cameras now." Andre didn't laugh. He scanned the letter, then sat down and typed a summary into the log. "Every move he makes is helping us more than hurting," he said quietly. "Keep the receipts." Malik leaned against the doorway. "Do you think it'll get worse?" Andre paused. "Yes, but that also means we're getting close to where it ends." Outside, the sprinkler clicked on with its usual whir, but now every sound felt amplified, like even the water was watching. The tone in the community shifted like a cold front. It wasn't obvious all at once. It crept in through small, almost imperceptible gestures. The elderly woman who used to wave at Malik every morning now looked past him with pursed lips. The couple across the street stopped responding to hello. A dog that used to run up to Andre wagging its tail now stayed leashed tightly as its owner crossed to the other sidewalk. At first, they tried to justify it. People were busy, maybe shy. Maybe they'd had a bad day. But then came the Saturday when Malik caught one of the neighbors photographing their backyard from the walking path behind the fence. He had just stepped outside with a mug of coffee when he saw her, mid-60s, khaki vest, wide-brimmed hat, holding her phone at chest level, camera angled through a slat in the fence. "Excuse me," Malik said, voice steady. The woman flinched but didn't lower her phone. "Just checking something. There's been a lot of activity behind this house." "This is our house," Malik replied, "and you're trespassing." "I'm on the trail," she snapped. "It's public." Malik stepped forward, calm but firm. "Taking pictures of private property is." She turned and walked off, muttering something about HOA rights and suspicious behaviors. Malik stood there for a long moment, heart pounding beneath his calm exterior, then went inside and opened the shared document. Later that week, they received a citation for an unapproved fire feature in the backyard. They didn't have one. What they did have was a citronella candle in a glass jar sitting on their patio table. It was in one of the photographs that appeared in the letter. Andre stared at the page, rubbing his temples. "They're playing games." "They're trying to exhaust us," Malik said. "Make us give up, make us look like troublemakers." "Well," Andre replied, sitting down with a pen and writing the date and time at the top of the document, "they're going to be disappointed." On Monday, the maintenance crew for the villas showed up unexpectedly. 2 workers began inspecting the gutters and eaves unannounced. Malik came home midday and found a ladder propped up against their bedroom window. "We didn't request this," he said. "Work order from property management," the older worker replied. "Who signed off on it?" Your landlord. Malik folded his arms. Did he say we'd be home? The man shrugged. We've got keys, happens all the time. Malik's stomach dropped. You've been inside. No, not yet, just prepping the outside. Don't go inside, Malik said quickly. This isn't authorized. That night, Andre installed an additional lock on the inside of the front door. He didn't say much while doing it. Malik watched from the kitchen, drying dishes slowly. I don't like that they have access, Malik said after a while. I don't like that they think they don't need permission. By now, Andre had multiple folders in his email labeled Havorson. Each one was timestamped, with attached PDFs of letters, screenshots of texts, photos of tampered property, and now the footage of the maintenance team. They had the beginnings of a pattern: unjustified citations, privacy breaches, fabricated violations. But Havorson wasn't done. On Thursday, Malik was pulling into the driveway when a security vehicle stopped just behind him. Two guards stepped out, one with a clipboard, the other with a camera. We've had a report of damage to shared property, the first one said. Malik stared. From who? I can't disclose that. And what exactly is damaged? The community light post on the corner. It's been scraped. Witness claimed a black car was seen backing into it. Malik's car was black, but there wasn't a single scratch on it. He walked them around the vehicle calmly, pointing out the absence of damage. He even offered to show them dashcam footage, which they declined. Still, the guard with the clipboard scribbled something down, and the camera flashed as it took wide-angle shots of Malik's car in the front of the house. After they left, Malik stood on the porch for several minutes before going inside. He didn't speak right away. Andre was reading in the living room and looked up, sensing something wrong. They're trying to make us look violent, Malik said. What happened? Fake property damage report. They sent security, took pictures, clipboard, and everything. Andre set his book down and stood up slowly. They're building a case. They're inventing a case. Later that night, Andre received an email from a board member on the HOA. The message was brief, impersonal, and ended with a warning. Failure to comply with community standards may result in eviction proceedings. No violation was listed, just a threat. Andre wrote a reply asking for clarification, citing the exact community standards they were supposedly violating. He didn't send it right away, he showed it to Malik first. You think they'll answer? Malik asked. No, but I want it documented that we asked. The next day, the sprinklers came on an hour earlier than scheduled. Andre was outside reading when the spray hit him directly, catching him off guard. He jumped back, surprised, then walked around the corner to the control box. It had been reprogrammed. He reset it and took a picture of the screen, then emailed it to himself with a subject line, Tampering, April 12. They weren't imagining it. This was deliberate. Then came the neighborhood meeting. They weren't invited, but a friend of Andre's, one of the professors who lived 2 blocks over, told him it would be worth attending. The agenda wasn't public, but the word was out that Havorson had requested a slot to discuss tenant behavior and enforcement. They went quietly, sat near the back. There were maybe 30 people in the community clubhouse. The air was filled with the faint scent of lemon cleaner and passive aggression. Havorson took the floor halfway through. He didn't mention Andre or Malik by name, but it didn't matter. Some residents, he said, have shown a lack of regard for the standards we've built here. Late-night gatherings, unapproved guests, improper modifications to landscaping. There's a reason this community has maintained its reputation, and we cannot let certain elements chip away at that. Someone in the front row murmured in agreement. Another person asked, is this about the couple in the corner villa? Havorson raised his hands. I'm not naming names, I'm just saying we have to protect what we've built. Malik looked around the room. Not a single face turned toward them, but not a single face looked away either. After the meeting, as people mingled near the door, Andre and Malik quietly left. No one stopped them, no one said anything. The silence was the loudest part. Back at home, Malik kicked off his shoes and sat at the edge of the couch, head in his hands. Andre opened the logbook again. What are you writing? Malik asked. The name of the meeting, the time, key phrases he used. You think this will be enough? I think it's going to have to be. Malik nodded slowly. I just wanted to live somewhere quiet, he said. That's all, we didn't do anything. I know, Andre said, placing a hand on his shoulder. And because we didn't do anything, we have the truth. We just need to keep gathering it. He turned to his laptop, typing quietly as Malik sat beside him, unmoving. The pressure had shifted from quiet hostility to active sabotage. Their peace had become a battlefield. But if Havorson thought they were going to break, he didn't know who he was dealing with. The morning after the HOA meeting, Malik sat on the patio with a notepad in his lap, scribbling dates and phrases. Normally, he would have been catching up on emails or scrolling through new shift schedules, but his focus had narrowed to one thing: keeping track. He wasn't the type to keep receipts, but these weren't casual annoyances anymore. This was organized pressure, and he could feel it pressing into every corner of their life. Andre emerged from the house holding 2 mugs of coffee. He handed one to Malik, who accepted it silently. "I've been thinking," Andre said. "We've got enough documentation now to talk to someone." "Like who?" "I reached out to a housing advocacy group this morning. They referred me to a lawyer." Malik looked up. "You already called." "She's expecting us to email her." Andre sat down across from him, the tension between them calm but simmering. Malik stared into his coffee for a long beat before speaking again. "I didn't come here to get into a fight," he said. "I came here to breathe." "I know," Andre replied, "but if we don't stand up now, this won't stop. Not with us, not with the next couple either." Malik nodded once, then tore the sheet off his notepad and laid it on the table. "Send her this too." Her name was Rachel Avery. She was white, sharp, and had the kind of calm voice that made you think she'd seen worse and handled it all. When they got her on Zoom later that evening, she greeted them with a smile that didn't feel performative and asked if they could walk her through everything slowly, starting from the day they moved in. They did. Andre did most of the talking at first, with Malik chiming in for the incidents he'd experienced directly. They recounted every inspection, every letter, the altered sprinkler system, the security report, the meeting. Rachel took notes but didn't interrupt. She only asked clarifying questions. When they finished, she leaned back in her chair. "You've got a pattern," she said, "and you've documented it well." Andre exhaled slightly, surprised by how much that affirmation meant. Rachel continued. "What you're dealing with is called constructive eviction. It's a slow-burn harassment strategy. People like your landlord don't issue a single illegal eviction notice. They just make life unbearable until you leave on your own." Malik looked down. "That's exactly what it feels like." Rachel nodded. "And he's using the HOA as a tool. They're laundering his harassment through official channels to make it look legitimate." "Can we stop it?" Andre asked. "You can fight it. The trick is doing it smart, not loud." She outlined a plan: gather more evidence, secure testimonials, file a formal housing discrimination complaint under the Fair Housing Act. She recommended they install an additional indoor camera, not to spy but to prove they weren't the ones causing any disturbances. She advised them to keep every email, every text, and if possible to gently engage with neighbors, even the cold ones. Someone had seen something, someone had doubts. "I'll represent you pro bono through the preliminary phase," Rachel said. "If it goes to litigation, we'll find funding." Malik blinked. "You don't even know us." "I don't need to. I've seen this before, and I believe you." For the first time in weeks, Malik felt something loosen in his chest. Over the next several days, they followed Rachel's instructions to the letter. Andre filed Freedom of Information Act requests for HOA board meeting minutes and community complaints. Malik installed a second camera in the foyer and began keeping a handwritten log of anything that felt even slightly off. Andre drafted a formal letter to Harasses, asserting their rights under housing law and requesting written clarification for all complaints to date. Harasses didn't reply. But the next day, a new sign appeared on their lawn. "No street parking. VIOLATORS will be TOWED." It wasn't there the day before, and it wasn't on any other property on the street. Malik took a picture. Andre submitted a complaint to the city. Rachel filed it as an example of discriminatory targeting. Then came the anonymous package. It arrived in a brown envelope with no return address. Inside were printed photos, grainy shots of Malik in scrubs walking home from the hospital, Andre at his desk through the window, their patio furniture, and their mailbox. There was no note. Malik opened it first, then silently passed the envelope to Andre. Neither of them said anything for a long while. They called Rachel. She told them not to confront Harasses directly. Instead, she filed a police report for stalking and requested a community security audit. They submitted the photos as evidence. That same night, a neighbor knocked on their door. He was middle-aged, white, and dressed in tennis shorts. They'd seen him around but never spoken. "Can I talk to you a second?" he asked. Malik hesitated, then nodded. "I saw the sign go up," the neighbor said, "and I saw it come down." Malik narrowed his eyes. "What do you mean?" "I was walking my dog early this morning. Someone, Harasses, I think, came by and removed it around 6 a.m., put it up the night before, then took it down like it never happened. Thought you should know." Malik looked at him for a long second. "Why are you telling me this now?" The man shifted on his feet. Because I think he's gone too far. I've lived here 15 years. I've seen him push people out before, but it's never looked like this. Andre stepped into the doorway. Would you be willing to write that down? The man hesitated, then nodded. I'll email you something. They sent it to Rachel the next morning. She added it to the growing file. What had started as vague discomfort had hardened into something undeniable. The file was thick now, printouts, affidavits, timestamps. Rachel arranged a meeting with a fair housing investigator from the county. It would be preliminary, informal, just a conversation, but a serious one. The night before the meeting, Andre and Malik sat at the kitchen table, sorting documents into labeled folders. Do you think they'll take us seriously? Malik asked. Andre didn't answer immediately. He was holding one of the HOA letters, rereading it. I think we've done everything right, and I think the truth is starting to catch up. Malik leaned back in his chair. I never thought our dream house would turn into all this. Andre set the letter down. We didn't come here to fight, remember? Malik gave a tired smile, but we will. They went to bed early that night, blinds drawn tight, door bolted, cameras rolling quietly in the background. Every inch of the house was quiet, but it wasn't peace. Not yet. The county housing investigator's name was Thomas Nguyen. He wore a simple gray suit and carried a leather folder, the kind that seemed to hold both rules and stories. He didn't waste time with small talk when he arrived. He shook both their hands firmly and sat at the dining table where Andre and Malik had neatly stacked evidence into labeled folders. Noise complaints, citations, surveillance footage, correspondence. Thomas glanced over the stack, flipping open the top folder as he spoke. Just to be clear, this meeting is informal. Nothing from today goes into an official hearing. I'm here to assess whether a deeper investigation is warranted. You'll want to walk me through things from the beginning and keep it to first-hand experiences. Andre nodded. We've documented everything. It's all in chronological order. For the next 2 hours they explained. Not just the events, but the tone, the way Havorson looked at them like they didn't belong, the neighbors' shifting stares, the feeling of being watched. Malik spoke slowly at first, careful to sound objective, but his voice cracked slightly when he described finding the envelope of photos. Thomas didn't interrupt. He just nodded, asked the occasional question, and kept writing in a small spiral notebook. When it was over, Thomas sat back and rested a hand on the folder. There's enough here to open a file. We'll notify you formally by mail. If this proceeds, you'll be asked to testify. Andre nodded, we're ready. Malik added, whatever it takes. Thomas's expression didn't change, but his voice lowered a note. You're not the first complaint I've received involving Havorson, but most of them never made it to this point. That sentence lingered long after Thomas left. Later that week, Rachel emailed to say the city had officially accepted the complaint. The process would take time, months, possibly longer, but the system had finally opened its doors. Andre and Malik felt a cautious relief, the kind that didn't erase tension but helped it sit lighter on the chest. Still, Havorson didn't back down. A few days after the meeting, a notice was posted at the community bulletin board by the clubhouse. It listed recommended revisions to HOA rules, including restrictions on renter duration minimums, guest stay limitations, and maintenance inspection flexibility. The language was vague, but the intent was clear: make it harder for tenants like Andre and Malik to feel welcome or even stay. Rachel read it and sighed through the phone. He's testing how much of the community he can manipulate. They needed more leverage, and that meant finding more voices. Andre posted discreetly in a local online community board asking if anyone had experienced issues with Azure Palm's property management. Within 2 hours, he had 3 private messages. By the next day, 7, most were brief and guarded, left after too many surprise inspections. Tired of the fake citations. Always felt like I was being watched. One message stood out. Hi Andre, my name Karina. I lived in Villa 12B with my wife for 6 months. We left after Havorson accused us of operating a business from the property because we hosted Sunday yoga in the backyard. He told us we were disrupting the family aesthetic. I still have the texts. Let me know if that helps. Andre replied instantly. Karina agreed to a Zoom call with him, Malik, and Rachel the following afternoon. She was in her early 30s, brown-skinned with short braids, and spoke with the weariness of someone who'd had to relive her frustration more than once. He kept saying we weren't the target demographic, she said. Never outright said gay, but it was clear. Did he follow through with any legal action? Rachel asked. No, we left before it got that far, didn't have the energy to fight, but I always regretted backing down. Karina sent over screenshots of her texts with Havorson, and Rachel began weaving them into the growing case file. She called a legal contact, and requested they begin preliminary research into historical complaints against Havorson and his property management business. Meanwhile, Malik began reaching out to more people who had responded to Andre's post. Some were reluctant to go on record, but a few agreed to write statements or offer their names for support if needed. One older man even offered archived HOA newsletters where Havorson had inserted owner-only engagement proposals, language that Rachel noted was legally questionable if used to target tenants specifically. As the case expanded, so did community awareness. A local housing advocacy group reposted their story, with their permission, in a newsletter about tenant harassment, framing it as a broader pattern of abuse hidden behind white picket fence civility. That same week, a young journalist from a regional paper reached out. Her name was Sophia, and she'd covered housing discrimination before. She wanted to write about Andre and Malik's experience, not sensationalize, she promised, but document. She said she could also dig deeper into Havorson's history. I have reason to believe this isn't the first time he's targeted LGBTQ+ tenants, she said over the phone. But you're the first ones who fought back with a lawyer and receipts. Rachel gave her limited access to the case file, enough to cross-reference names and find public records. Within days, Sophia uncovered 2 former lawsuits filed against Havorson, both settled quietly, both involving claims of tenant harassment. Neither involved LGBTQ+ tenants directly, but both showed a pattern of using HOA rules as weapons. Sophia's article ran a week later. It was straightforward and devastating. Luxury living, quiet evictions, when HOA rules become weapons. It didn't name Malik and Andre directly per their request, but it described the case, the tactics, and the pushback. The article included commentary from fair housing advocates, Rachel, and even Karina, who agreed to speak on record. The response was immediate. The Azure Palms HOA received a formal inquiry from the city's Housing Affairs Office. Rachel was contacted by 3 additional tenants from nearby communities, each describing nearly identical experiences with Havorson. 2 had lived in different cities but under the same management company. Andre sat on the patio that night scrolling through the article on his phone, reading each line slowly. Malik joined him barefoot, carrying 2 mugs of tea. "Do you think it'll matter?" Malik asked. "It already does," Andre said. "Look at all the people it pulled out of the shadows." He turned the phone so Malik could see the comments. Dozens of them, some from people in other states, others from current Azure Palms residents now questioning what they'd accepted as normal. Malik smiled softly. "Feels like we're not alone anymore." "We never were," Andre said. "We just couldn't hear each other." The silence that had once isolated them had cracked open. People were speaking, the community was listening, and Havorson, he wasn't controlling the narrative anymore. Later that night, Malik returned to the file and added another folder to the growing collection. He labeled it simply Voices. The hearing wasn't in a courtroom. It was held in a drab municipal building with beige walls and buzzing fluorescent lights, but for Andre and Malik, it felt just as serious. They arrived early, dressed sharp, folders in hand, accompanied by Rachel, who walked with quiet confidence, her bag slung over one shoulder like it weighed nothing. The room filled slowly, representatives from the county's Housing Affairs Office, a few reporters, a few people from advocacy groups they didn't recognize. At the center was a long rectangular table, flanked by chairs and microphones. Everyone sat close, but the atmosphere was tense and formal. Havorson arrived 10 minutes late. He wore a crisp navy suit and entered with a lawyer, a man who looked like he'd spent his career billing by the hour and avoiding eye contact. Havorson didn't look at Malik or Andre. He scanned the room and sat down like this was just another property transaction. The chair of the housing board, a middle-aged woman with silver hair and a steady gaze, opened the meeting with a clear voice. She thanked everyone for attending and read aloud the purpose of the hearing, to evaluate claims of discriminatory practices involving rental enforcement and tenant treatment under the Fair Housing Act. Rachel began. She didn't launch into accusations. She opened with context, who Malik and Andre were, how long they had lived at Azure Palms, and what their initial expectations had been. She described the progression, the inspections, the altered sprinklers, the anonymous photos, the sign, the letter, the meeting. Every word was grounded in documented evidence. When she finished, Andre took a deep breath and spoke directly. "This wasn't just a few bad interactions," he said. "It was coordinated. It was meant to unsettle us, make us question if we belonged. We weren't treated as renters, we were treated as intruders." Malik followed. His voice was low but steady. "I work in a hospital. I come home tired, hoping for quiet. Instead, I get watched, accused, followed. We documented everything, not because we expected trouble, but because we saw it growing. And we knew that without proof, no one would believe us." Then came the testimony. Karina appeared on a video call, her face projected on a monitor. She spoke clearly, detailing her own experience. She described the language Havorson had used, how it was always just vague enough to slip away from scrutiny but just pointed enough to make its target feel othered. A second former tenant testified in person. She had lived in a different city, under a different HOA managed by Havorson's company. She described nearly identical tactics: unannounced inspections, sudden citations, and the eventual pressure to leave. Then came the documents. Rachel distributed copies of the letters, photographs, texts, and HOA newsletters with proposed rule changes. She included the anonymous package and the tampered footage. Every item had a date, a description, and a link in the chain. Havorson's lawyer objected several times, once about the relevance of past tenants, once about hearsay in Karina's testimony. Each objection was noted and overruled. When it was finally Havorson's turn to speak, he sat forward and cleared his throat. "I've managed properties for over 20 years, he began. "My concern has always been maintaining the quality and harmony of the communities I serve. I've enforced rules equally. If some tenants felt targeted, it was never personal. I was acting in the best interest of the neighborhood." The board chair leaned in. "Did you know about the photographs delivered to the complainant's home?" "No," Havorson said. "Absolutely not. I would never approve something like that." "Do you deny authoring the text messages submitted into evidence?" His lawyer cut in. "My client acknowledges some messages were sent in frustration, but denies that they reflect discriminatory intent." "Do you believe that LGBTQ+ tenants deserve equal treatment in housing?" Havorson hesitated. "Of course." Rachel didn't even look at him. She was already preparing the closing summary. By the end of the hearing, the file had grown larger than anyone in the room expected. What began as one couple's complaint had become a portfolio of patterns. Not only harassment, not only surveillance, but a strategy, a system cloaked in the civility of community standards. The board said they would take everything under review. A ruling would be issued within 30 days. But it didn't take a ruling for everyone in that room to understand what had happened. The silence that followed was different from the ones Malik and Andre had come to fear. This one was filled with awareness. Outside the building, Malik leaned against the stone railing, looking up at the overcast sky. Andre joined him, rubbing his hands together against the wind. "I think they saw it," Malik said. "They did," Andre replied. "It's not just shadows anymore, everything's out in the light." A few days later, Sophia published a follow-up piece. This one included quotes from the hearing, a side column about Karina's story, and a timeline graphic showing the similarities across tenants. The story gained traction. It was shared across social media by housing activists, community organizers, and even a few politicians. Rachel called it a quiet ripple, the kind that doesn't crash but spreads until it touches everything. The pressure mounted. The HOA board at Azure Palms issued a statement within the week, announcing a temporary suspension of enforcement privileges from Havorson's company pending an internal review. Residents received an email encouraging them to report any grievances directly to the board instead of through the landlord. It wasn't justice, not yet, but it was the first public admission that something was wrong. Then came the city's ruling. The official findings cited a clear and repeated pattern of discriminatory enforcement practices and recommended legal action for violations of tenant protection statutes. Havorson was ordered to pay damages, relinquish his authority over the HOA's enforcement process, and complete a mandatory anti-discrimination training program before engaging in further property management within the county. Andre read the ruling aloud at the kitchen table while Malik sat across from him, mouth slightly open, barely blinking. "He's out," Andre said. "They actually did it." "They made it official," Malik whispered. That night they walked through the neighborhood for the first time in weeks. Not to document, not to gather evidence, just to walk. They passed a few neighbors on their porches. This time people nodded, some smiled, one even said hello. The houses looked the same, the lawns just as neat, but something invisible had shifted. Not everyone agreed with them. Not everyone had changed their minds, but they had been seen, and more importantly, they had been heard. Back at home, Malik poured 2 glasses of wine. They sat outside on the patio where it had all begun, where once they'd whispered beneath porch lights, afraid of who might be listening. "I never thought we'd still be here," Malik said. Andre clinked his glass lightly. Neither did he. Their fight wasn't over. Systems didn't change overnight, but something real had happened. The silence had broken, the system had been forced to listen, and their dignity-tested, pressed, threatened had never once cracked. It was a strange thing, peace. After months of unease, silence no longer felt like a threat. For the first time since they moved in, Andre and Malik could sit in their living room without glancing at the window every few minutes. The hallway camera still blinked steadily from its corner, but it felt less like protection now and more like an old habit. The news of Havorson's removal spread quickly. By the end of the month, his management company had been fully stripped of its authority over Azure Palms. A new third-party group had been brought in by the board to audit the community's operations, and tenants were being contacted for interviews. Andre and Malik were the first on the list. Rachel called them the day the report went public. Her voice was more relaxed than it had ever been. They're implementing oversight across all 5 of Havorson's managed properties, not just Azure Palms. Andre blinked, still seated at the kitchen counter where he'd just poured coffee. All of them. Every last one. Your case cracked the door, the rest pushed it open. Malik, who had been watering the houseplants nearby, set the watering can down and looked over. What about him, personally? They're pursuing professional penalties, Rachel said. He's being fined, his business license is under review, and there's civil litigation pending from 2 former tenants who saw your story. There was a long silence on the line. Andre didn't know what to say. The word justice felt too clean for something that had come with so many scars. Rachel continued, softer this time. You did more than defend yourselves, you changed something. Malik didn't respond right away. When he did, his voice was quiet. We're grateful for everything. You did the hard part, she replied. I just helped carry the truth. When they hung up, neither of them moved for a moment. It was Malik who finally spoke. Let's plant something. Andre turned toward him. What? A tree or something permanent, something that says we were here and we stayed. The next day they went to the nursery down the highway and picked out a young magnolia tree. It wasn't much taller than Andre, with pale green leaves and a single early bloom already pushing through despite the season. Malik smiled at it like it had introduced itself. They planted it in the backyard, just off the edge of the patio. The earth was soft from a recent rain. They dug together silently and pressed the roots down gently. Andre covered them while Malik held the trunk upright. They didn't say much, just moved in quiet rhythm, like people who had worked side by side through harder things. Later that evening, as the sun began to sink behind the rooftops, Andre lit 2 candles and brought out a blanket. They sat together outside, watching the soft orange light filter through the leaves of their new tree. Do you remember when we first got here? Malik asked. Andre nodded. I remember thinking we'd found peace. We had, Malik said. We just didn't know what we'd have to do to keep it. Andre leaned his head on Malik's shoulder. The air smelled like soil and citrus. It was the same yard, the same view, but it wasn't the same. 3 weeks later, a letter arrived in their mailbox, not an envelope, but a hand-folded sheet slipped inside without postage. It was from the neighbor who had once watched them coldly, the one with the manicured lawn and the stone angel in the flower bed. It read, I didn't know what was happening. I should have. I didn't speak up. I've lived here a long time and I've seen people disappear. I told myself it was for other reasons. I told myself it wasn't my place. It was, I'm sorry, welcome to the neighborhood. If you ever need anything, I'm across the street. Malik read it twice, then set it down slowly. Andre picked it up, scanned it, and set it back on the table. That's more than I thought we'd get, he said. It's more than he had to say, Malik added. They didn't reply, but the next day Andre waved when he saw the neighbor out front. The man nodded back a little awkwardly but without hesitation. The magnolia tree grew quickly. By midsummer it had doubled in size, its leaves thick and glossy. One morning they woke to find a yellow butterfly perched on a branch, unmoving as if claiming it. Andre took a picture and saved it to his phone. They went on with their lives. Malik picked up extra shifts at the hospital. Andre returned to teaching in person that fall. The cameras stayed, but they stopped checking them every day. The file Rachel had built grew dusty in a drawer, not forgotten, just no longer active. Sometimes new tenants would move into the villas nearby. Sometimes people would ask questions. They always answered honestly, not bitterly, not triumphantly, just truthfully. It became known in quiet ways that things had changed in Azure Palms. One evening, Sophia, the journalist, sent them a link to a blog post. It had been written by a young couple who had recently moved into one of Havorson's former properties. They described how they'd found resources, legal tips, and encouragement through a story we found online about 2 men who didn't back down. Malik read it aloud while Andre finished cooking. Neither of them said anything at first. Then Malik laughed, shaking his head. Can you believe it, that they're talking about us? Andre smiled. We made it through. No, Malik said, looking around the room at the walls they painted together, the rug they argued over in a store aisle, the pictures on the shelves. We didn't just make it through. We stayed. We held our place. Andre nodded, and he's gone. The story didn't end with a single courtroom win or a viral article. It ended slowly, quietly, with moments that stacked on top of one another until they felt solid. It ended with the normal things: groceries, dishes, early alarms. It ended with trust returning to the spaces inside their home. And that was what they had fought for all along, not revenge, not a dramatic finish, just the right to live fully, to take up space without being punished for it. They still tended the magnolia tree. Each year it grew stronger, roots deepening into the same ground that once tried to reject them. Now it held them. And from time to time, someone would stop and ask what kind of tree it was, and Malik would answer, "It's a magnolia. We planted it the year everything changed." No one ever asked what he meant by that. But sometimes people paused a little longer than necessary, just long enough to understand.